This podcast is brought to you by SecureFrame.com, the platform for automated compliance. SecureFrame makes it quick and easy to achieve a number of compliance measures in a matter of weeks rather than who knows how long. For those that have dealt with compliance before, you know that it's overwhelming to say the least. Creating policies from scratch, manually collecting loads of screenshot evidence, ensuring employee compliance, and keeping track of hundreds of vendors and documents. Sounds fun, right? Thankfully, our friends at SecureFrame have simplified the entire process to save your team months of time and effort. SecureFrame automates hundreds of manual tasks. They streamline evidence collection through over 100 deep integrations with your cloud providers, HR tools, dev tools, and more. They provide you with over 40 auditor-approved policies and give you step-by-step guidance from in-house compliance experts. If this sounds like something you want to learn more about, go to secureframe.com to schedule a personalized demo today.
Millions of people move to the U.S. every year, and when you first arrive, you have to start over. You have to get a bank account, a credit card, an auto loan, all those things. And all those enterprises need to check your U.S. credit history to get you approved, but by having just arrived in this country, you don't have any information, and so you get rejected or have to resort to second-class products and services like secured cards or asking your fifth uncle to co-sign your apartment lease. So we solved that problem, and the way that we do it is we've gone around the world, so we can now access about 1.5 billion credit files all around the world. And anytime one of those people moves from one country to another or moves to the United States, we are able to pull their history from their home country and use that to help them get approved.
Hi everyone, it's Julie Verhage-Greenberg here with your FinTech Today podcast, where we talk about the latest trends in FinTech and interview the industry's movers and shakers. In this episode, I am joined by Misha Esipov, co-founder and CEO of Nova Credit, which is disrupting the credit space for immigrants in the United States. Misha, I remember, 2, 3, maybe 4 years ago at this point that we met at Bank of America, actually, because you were in an accelerator program where the final round where you guys were presenting and everything took place at their office in New York City.
That's right. Yeah, thanks for having me on the show.
Of course. So since then, a lot has changed. I remember at the time talking to you and thinking, wow, this is a super interesting space, because at the time I was actually dating a person that had no credit history because they were from the UK and they were living in the US. I was like, this is so applicable to what he's going through right now. Talk us through a little bit about what's going on in the space these days and how things have been going since then.
Yeah, so for those of you that don't know, Nova Credit's been around for about 5-6 years now. The problem that we solve is one of financial identity mobility. So millions of people move to the U.S. Every year, and when you first arrive, you have to start over. You have to get a bank account, a credit card, an auto loan, a student loan, an apartment lease, a cell phone plan, all those things. And all those enterprises need to check your U.S. bureau, your U.S. credit history to get you approved, but by having just arrived in this country, you don't have any information here, and so you get rejected or have to resort to second-class types of products and services like secured cards or asking your fifth uncle to co-sign your apartment lease or something like that. And so we solved that problem, and the way that we do it is we've gone around the world and we've aggregated the global credit bureau space, and so we can now access about 1.5 billion credit files all around the world. And anytime one of those people moves from one country to another or moves to the United States, we are able to pull their history from their home country and use that to help them get approved.
So since I met you, what has changed in the space more broadly? What does your traction look like? And I know you guys aren't the only players in this space this time either. There's been other developments, other competitors popping up. So how has the landscape changed for you since, 2016, 2017?
Yeah, so I'd say we don't have any direct competitors still. We're the only ones who really approach this problem at a systemic level, where we're solving the information gap, where millions of people come here every year. Those people account for the majority of U.S. population growth, meaning there's more folks who move to the U.S. every year than there are Americans who turn 18. And the question is, of all the products and services that they need, since they do have to fully reestablish themselves, which of them are they going to get from the neobanks versus from the incumbents? And in our view, it doesn't matter to us. What we care about is that there's systemic availability of financial services for this population of people as if they were still in their home country or as if they'd lived in the United States their entire life. And so we power a lot of those upstarts and neobanks that are focused on the immigrant segment. We help provide them with data. We also work with some of the largest financial institutions in the world, like American Express and other players like that, to help this segment get cards, help this segment get student loans, help them get auto loans, help them get personal loans, help them get cell phone plans, and more.
Why do you think that you guys are still the only one that's directly doing this? Like you mentioned, there's some that are like doing it in different dynamics, but why do you think someone else hasn't tried to do the same formula that you guys are?
It's too hard.
What
to be
makes it
honest.
hard?
Yeah. I mean, if you think about what we've had to do, like we've literally flown around the world, met with regulators, met with credit bureaus in few dozen countries at this point, set up partnerships, set up integrations. We've come to the U.S. We get that data here. We have to be a CRA, which almost every fintech under the sun avoids becoming a CRA at all costs. CRA, credit reporting agency. We've taken that on from the very beginning. We have been a CRA for 5 years, and then only then do you have to start selling to banks. And selling to banks, as any of your B2B fintech listeners can relate, is a nightmare. It's really hard and takes many years and a long time. And so, just getting a business like this off the ground to get to some meaningful revenue is a 4, 5, 6 year journey. And for whatever reasons, we're kind of the only ones in the space who've really taken this approach. It has its pros and cons, but at the end of the day, we believe that what we have built is absolutely enduring and will be part of the financial fabric of the world's financial system.
Talking to Misha when he was thinking about this idea, would you still tell him to go forward with this, even though now you know how hard it actually is to do it? Or like, what sort of advice would you have for Misha 6 years ago?
I'd say I wouldn't tell him the truth, like I wouldn't tell him how hard it can be and will be, and I wouldn't tell him that there will be a pandemic that will put you into a tailspin for a few quarters. But at the end of the day, I mean, starting a business is as anyone who has will tell you, as you have, it's like it is a roller coaster, and you gotta be in it for the ride, because it is a ride of a lifetime. But like the challenges of breaking through long partner sales cycles and regulatory challenges and hiring engineer, like all sorts of challenges that any business has to deal with. This one is particularly complex because we sit in between two incredibly slow moving and large and bureaucratic types of companies, the credit bureaus on one side, the banks on the other. But at the end of the day, like that is, I believe, the right answer for the next 100 years. And that's, that is what we've built.
You gave me an amazing segue and you didn't even know it in that one. I wanted to talk about the pandemic with you because you guys did have to do quite a bit of, I don't know if pivoting is the right word, but you went through a lot in 2020, not just from like I'm sure many of your employees dealt with COVID from like a personal level, but from a company level as well, a lot happened.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, our flagship product, so the credit passport, is, it's powered by the movement of people all around the world. And for the first time in 100 years with COVID, that movement of people went to zero for about 6 months. And so we saw, volumes collapse, all the momentum in the business, all our pipeline kind of fall apart. And it was a pretty dark period there. And had we not just closed a $50 million round 4 weeks before the pandemic, it would have been far worse. But we went into the storm with enough capital to feel confident that we could continue to invest in growth, despite the core business stalling out, frankly, for much of 2020. And we sort of went out and we went to the market and we said, hey, we are really good at data partnerships, data integrations, being a CRA, consumer permission flows, understanding how to talk to credit risk officers. Like, what do you need help with? Like, what are the types of challenges that you're working through here in the darkest days of the pandemics? And ultimately that led us to accelerating parts of our future roadmap. We've had a few announcements in the space of our work with bank transaction data and our partnership with SoFi, where we are building a series of analytical solutions as a credit bureau to help not only immigrants get better access to financial services, but frankly, anyone who's new to credit or anyone who's thin, who doesn't have enough credit bureau information, but has experience with having a bank account and being able to use that information to help them put their best foot forward.
How has the buy now, pay later market played into your space? Because I know I bring this up because there's been this big debate on whether buy now, pay later should be a part of the credit score. And there's pros and cons to it. The pro would be someone that doesn't have much of a credit history. If they've been paying their bill to Klarna or their bill to a firm, whatever it might be, that should show like, hey, they're a worthy credit risk. The con from my point of view is that if I currently have a balance with Klarna, it doesn't get counted on my credit report, although that's likely to change soon. Whereas if I'm carrying a balance on the American Express Planet platform, that is counted on my credit score, and it's an increased credit balance, which dings your credit score sometimes. Getting back to the gist of the question, how has that changed your business? And do you use buy now, pay later at all to try to gauge consumers' credit scores that don't have a credit history here yet?
So we don't play all that much directly in the buy now pay later space here in the U.S. We have a few partners that are involved in that business, but when it comes to like our core data, the way that we would see that data is to the extent that it appears in someone's foreign credit bureau, or to the extent that a buy now pay later loan appears in someone's bank account, right? Like paying for that. And so that's something we can catch through our open banking relationships, partnerships, integrations. I think ultimately our view is that, any information that a consumer can use to build a more complete credit profile is information that they should have the right and ability to bring into a credit application process, because that's just going to help more people have a more fair and inclusive experience here in the U.S. financial system.
On the credit front, there's been a bit of like rising delinquencies and whatnot now that we're starting to come out of the pandemic, but there's no stimulus checks anymore. People might have taken on some debt during the pandemic. And we've seen this start to rise just a little bit. What changes have you guys been seeing, and how has that impacted your business?
Yeah, I think like the most relevant example I can share is I think one of the big questions around specifically the immigrant segment was like, well, what happens in a recession, right? What happens when people leave? And what we have seen across the board, across all of our partners, is that the immigrant segment has outperformed all sorts of expectations, outperformed the U.S. population from a credit performance perspective through this pandemic, through this, if you want to refer to it as a recession, or at least a brief recession as well. And I think that just speaks to the core principle that our business was founded on, which is that, if you are a good borrower and have displayed a high willingness to pay, that is intrinsic to who you are. It doesn't matter whether you're located in one country or another, or in New York City or San Francisco. Like, who you are as a borrower, your character travels with you around the world, travels with you. And so that is at its essence why what we do works, and why credit risk officers believe in it, because you as a human being and your character is not changing as you move from one country to another. And we've seen that play out in the pandemic.
Speaking of like customers and growth and everything, once someone does start to build a credit history, or that you've helped them enough in the US that they're able to get cards and stuff here, how do you think about customer retention in that case?
I think we've done our jobs. And we've helped somebody enter the U.S. financial system and start their journey of building U.S. credit. And that is an amazing wow experience that we've created for somebody that otherwise would just get stuck in this like spiraling catch-22 that I'm sure you and your listeners have talked extensively about, of how hard it is to build credit. Once someone has an established U.S. credit file, the opportunities for us to continue to engage with that customer involve having them tell their friends, their peers, their diaspora about how this solution now exists, as well as to the extent that individual chooses to then move back to where they're from, or move to a different country, we can also support them. This is on our roadmap for this year. We'll have some more announcements here in the next few months of making their information here in the United States with their consent available in other markets. So like if you wanted to move to Canada for whatever reason, or to Singapore or the UK, those will be solvable issues or problems here in the next few quarters.
So you're kind of like, if anyone's seen the Hinge commercials where it's the dating app meant to be like deleted or whatever, you don't want them to delete you, but hey, if you have found a relationship or you have your credit history now, like, you've done your job essentially.
Right. And I think there's a lot of more nuance about what our consumer product does in terms of like providing content and education and helping people make that immigration journey a lot less scary, a lot less vulnerable, a lot less unknown, beyond just financial services, in addition to the reality that, like, yeah, you may have gotten your first bank account or your first credit card, but there are a number of other products you're going to need over the course of your first few years that take several years of financial history to build, to be eligible for.
So, as someone that knows the credit industry and the space more than the majority of people, you're probably, if there was like a top 1% of people that knew a lot about credit, you would be a part of that group. And not only in the US, but in many countries around the world. What do you think the future of credit is? Because there's been an argument in fintech and elsewhere, like, is the credit system broken? Is it not broken? Like, what changes do we need to make? And you know more than anyone else that it's a complicated answer.
Yeah. Well, first I'll give a plug for our head of risk and analytics, Sarah Davies. If you call me within the 1% of global credit knowledge, she's the 1% of 1%. She created the Vantage score, which many consumers are aware of.
Yeah.
Built it from scratch, and so she's our head of risk analytics and is helping build out all of our cash flow and verification of income work, our credit passport work. But I think, like, in terms of where the space is going, like, my view is credit bureaus are not going away. Like, they are absolutely foundational and critical to the creation and sustainability of a safe and sound financial system. Like, they are critical to that. And I think the moats around those businesses of being furnished by thousands or tens of thousands of financial institutions are just like really hard to break through for an incumbent, for a new entrant. But I think there's a lot of interesting stuff that's going to play out in the next few years. Dare I drop the terms Web3 or DeFi or crypto lending? I think a lot of, and we saw an announcement the last couple of days. I think a lot of this, off-chain credit bureau information, not only here in the U.S. but all around the world, will start to make its way on-chain. And like, I do believe in the potential for more, unsecured consumer lending to take place. And I believe that for that to occur, there has to be both a source of truth about what someone's past experience has been as a borrower. So I do think the credit bureaus continue to play a key role in that. And there has to be recourse back into the real world. And so I think furnishing from on-chain back off-chain is going to be a part of this. And, it's still very much in the early days. But I think to the extent any listeners are working on those types of problems and are interested in tapping into 1.5 billion credit records, which is what we can access around the world, more credit bureau data than any company in the world, all in a single standardized format, that's a problem we'd love to partner and work on.
What are you guys thinking about internally about Web3 and crypto, since you brought up the buzzwords?
I couldn't resist. I mean, that is what we're thinking about. I mean, like, everything we've seen in the world to date has been entirely collateralized. And that is not financial inclusion. That is like that's fueling speculation, with all due respect to those players. I think but I'm not saying it's not, that's a good start, but ultimately, like, we want to see that move towards a world of being able to power unsecured, uncollateralized lending. And for that, you need to be able to have a source of truth around someone's ability and willingness to pay, as well as a mechanism to ensure that, the system isn't abused. So there has to be recourse back.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned that there's going to be more announcements in 2022 for you guys. Give us a little teaser of what customers should be on the look for and how you guys think about growth in the next coming months and years.
Yeah, so we're making obviously a big push into accelerating the credit passport. So our core flagship product, adding more countries into that, launching with some of the additional major card issuers and other verticals. We had an announcement in the auto space a few months back. So that's a big area of investment for us. We're also taking that product internationally, so serving migrant corridors, not only bound for the U.S., but people moving from let's say Nigeria to the UK, or India to Singapore, or China to Hong Kong. There's all these corridors around the world where this problem does exist, and that's an opportunity for us to help more people enter the financial system. And then finally, it's what we're doing in the world of bank data. That's a huge area of investment. We see a really big opportunity there to support more people, not only immigrants, with better access to financial services. We think we're well positioned. Like we've cut our teeth on credit bureau data the last 5-6 years, and we're partnering up with some really thoughtful and innovative players to really help bring forward the ability for consumers to put their best foot forward.
Awesome. And if someone wants to find out more about you guys or get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Just email me, Misha at novacredit.com, or go to our website, novacredit.com. And happy to help, happy to route you to whoever the right folks are on our team. It's a small. I think it's still a pretty small ecosystem, but we'll see.
Yeah, for sure. It's a small ecosystem, but a growing ecosystem. We'll leave it
for
at
sure.
that. And I know you guys have a bunch of roles that are open right now. I think one or two of them might be on our job board, fintechtoday.co. Click on the jobs on the side. Lots of cool roles at Nova Credit and elsewhere. Otherwise, I will see you guys next time. And Misha, thank you so much for joining us. It was great to catch up.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, and thanks for everyone for tuning in.